The Death March, I was in the first group, and it took me 5 days, 125 miles, and when we got into camp, it was an old Filipino camp, and there was one water spigot for the whole camp, and I ended up on the burial detail, and I buried 500 a day for over a month. Fellows I knew at 300 pounds, we buried at 50 pounds. I'm not counting the people that were killed on the march. Tanks ran over our people, the Japs beheaded people, they shot people, they bayoneted people, and we left people laying all along the march. So anyway, a month later they sent me to Bataan Death, which is a work camp, and I spent some time there, and then they decided that they wanted to expand Nichols Field, and this was under the Skull, the worst Japanese we ever had. And I spent 3 years there under him, and again, his idea of fun was chopping your head off and then kicking the body into the grave. He made you dig your grave first, though. Then, in October of '44, there's 4,000 islands in the archipelago, and we had guys scattered all through them. They brought us, all of us able to work, into Manila, and they brought in 15 old ships. They put 900 of us on each ship. We're going to Japan to work. Our Navy sank all of those ships. I was in one of the 3 that got to Hong Kong, and the 14th Air Force out of India bombed the ship I was on, and we had to change ships so I could finally get to Japan. So I got this, ended in Japan, and ended up in a copper mine in northern Japan, and that's where I was until the end of the war. To tell you how things worked, the war ended on the 8th of September. We didn't see anybody. Long in October, here comes some planes with red stars on them. Of course, you know who those are. And finally, we saw a plane with a white star. And he dropped a note saying he'd be back, and he'd bring a B-29 in with food and medicine and clothing, which happened the next day. He brought it in, and they parachuted the stuff out, and still nothing happened. MacArthur was sitting on his fat fanny in Tokyo and enjoying the hell out of the thing. And finally, Sergeant O'Hara said, "I've had enough of this," so he went to Tokyo, and all of a sudden then everything started our way. But they didn't come and get it. That was too much work for them. So what they did, they said, "You take over a train and come down to the coast, and we'll have a hospital ship there." So we took over a train, Japanese train, and took everybody that was in the camp, laying sick or lady, and brought them all down and put them on the hospital ship. And so we got deloused and cleaned up, you know, new clothing. And then this elderly lady said, "You haven't had any shots in 4 years." I said, "That's right, I haven't." She said, "Well, you're going to get it." So they lined up 3 nurses here, 3 nurses here. The first thing they did, they hit us with alcohol. And I knew that was wrong, but that was beside the point. And the first gal that hit me broke the needle off, and I had to wait till they got the pliers and pull the needle out of my arm. And then I got my 6 shots, walked down there, and she gave me a double shot of bourbon. you hit somebody with iodine so you know they've been through the line. So anyway, she didn't like me, and so she said to me, I'm not going to put up with you. And I said, well, it's mutual. And she said, you see that tin can sitting over there? And I said, yes, I see it. She said, it's going to Tokyo tonight, and you be on it. So I was fine. I went down there. This chief met me, and he said, how long has it been since you've had ice cream? And I said, 4 years. And he said, come with me. He went to the galley and gave me a bowl of ice cream. And then he said, how long has it been since you slept in sheets? And I said, 4 years. He said, well, I'm going to work the shift going to Tokyo. And he says, you got my bunk for tonight. So I slept in the sheets quarters that night. And the next day we got into Tokyo and found out there was an airplane flying down to the Philippines, and I knew I had to go there because they wouldn't let us come to the States till we weighed 120 pounds. I only weighed 80 pounds at the time, so I got on the plane and flew to the hospital in the Philippines, and when I finally got up to 120, they let me come to the States. So I stayed in and come to the Korean War. I was at Fort Benning, Georgia. I was OD that day. The next morning, General Burroughs called me in and he said, got some news for you. He said, you got 3 days to fly to Korea. I had the only unit like in the Army. And so off I went, spent almost 2.5 years in Korea before I got a replacement. So then I came back to the States and went to missile school and a few other schools, Clinton Flight School. And then there was a little rhubarb come up in '55 called the Cold War. So there was an airplane available. They flew me to that one. And that was 3 years. So I came back to States in '58, signed the White Sands Missile Range, and I could see the next one coming. And I said, no, this is enough. I retired in 1960, but I did send 4 boys to Vietnam. They all returned. The day I retired, I became a Boy Scout exec, and I built camp for the Boy Scouts. And then after 20 years of that, I thought, well, if I keep working, some young buck won't have a job, so I better retire. And I've been a volunteer ever since. Now, does anyone have a question? Okay, fine. And have a happy conclusion of your meeting here. And we think it's great that you're doing this. And thank you very much.